Hi, this is Jim Hopkinson from SalaryTutor.com, and you're listening to The Go Creative Show.
Hey everyone, my name is Ben Consoli. I am a director and owner of BC Media Productions, and this is The Go Creative Show, the show dedicated to creative professionals in the video production, filmmaking, television, and music industries. Jim Hopkinson is the creator of SalaryTutor.com, where he offers training on how to get paid what you're worth. Jim and I discuss how to set your rates, discussing budget with your clients, and when to say no to a project. The Go Creative Show is supported by our friends at Kessler, making innovative tools for filmmakers. Visit them at KesslerCrane.com. Rule Boston Camera, buy, rent, create at Rule.com. Newsshooter.com, essential news for real-world shooters. Hedge for Mac, the fastest way to back up media. And PremiumBeat.com, premium, royalty-free music and sound. Why is it that the hardest thing to talk about with your clients is budget? And it always is. And why is it that every time you speak to other people that are in your industry, you want so badly to ask, how much do you charge? But you just can't. It's a taboo subject. It's something we don't talk about that much. But today, all of that changes because the entire episode is about just that. What to charge. How to talk to your clients about budget, how to make sure that your clients' expectations are in line with what reality is, and so much more. And that's what Jim Hopkinson is all about. He has a great website called SalaryTutor.com. And you hear the word salary and you think, yeah, but I don't work for a big company. I'm a freelancer. All of these skills translate to freelancers as well. We actually talk a lot about the creative industry and freelancers and how to use these skills to negotiate their salaries, because even though it's not technically salaries, you still have to negotiate basically for each project. So these skills are important across the board. And we're going to talk about all of that in a couple of minutes. But before we get there, Rule Boston Camera, one of our fantastic sponsors. Rule is the place to go to purchase and rent all of your production equipment. We all know that. We talk about it every week. But you may not know that they have events called Learning Labs. These are free events, and they happen pretty much every month. They have a couple of them. And they've got two coming up I want to make you guys aware of. First, on Wednesday, February 8th at 10 a.m., it's called 4K UHD HDR RAW. Decode the buzzwords and increase your impact. Sounds like an interesting one. And it's actually going to be broadcast live on Facebook. How cool is that? So if you can't make it to Boston to see this stuff in person, watch it on Facebook Live at 10 a.m. The event is free, and of course, Facebook Live feed is free as well. And then Wednesday, February 22nd, Shooting with Drones. This is also live streaming on Facebook. It's at 10 a.m. and it's free if you want to go there in person. But if you can't make it and you can't make the live stream, they also post everything on Vimeo. So no matter what you use, you can have access to their great events and the great information. So head over to Rule.com, RULE.com for more information, and to RSVP, Rule.com. And lastly, Hedge for Mac. Hedge is the fastest application for importing and backing up media on OS X. It has a simple interface, but it's very powerful, and it's built for video, photo, and audio in mind, because you can import multiple sources to multiple destinations at the same time. It's optimized for files 100 megabytes or larger, and it's faster than the Finder. So these are the things. You want peace of mind when you're copying when you're copying your footage. You want to make sure it's being copied correctly, and Hedge will cross-verify with the original, so you got that. You want it to be fast, which it is, so you have that. And you don't want to spend a ton of money, and that is also what Hedge for Mac is all about. They have a free version, so you can't get any less expensive than that. But the full paid version, where you have access to all of the power, is only $100. And if you go to hedgeformac.com/Go Creative Show, you get a 20% off discount. How about that? Hedge for Mac, HEDGEFORMAC.com/Go Creative Show. All right, it's time for our spotlight. Jim Hopkinson. Jim Hopkinson teaches ambitious professionals how to negotiate salary and get paid what they're worth. Simple as that. And he's the author of the book Salary Tutor, Learn the Salary Negotiation Secrets No One Ever Taught You, and he's the creator of SalaryTutor.com. Jim and I discuss salary and rate negotiation skills for creative professionals, whether you're a freelancer, business owner, or employee. We also share thoughts on how to discuss budget with your clients, how undercutting your competition may not be the best long-term strategy, and much, much more. If you've ever asked yourself, what should I charge? This episode is not to be missed. So I'm here with Jim Hopkinson, teacher, author, and salary negotiator. He has a great website called salarytutor.com, which is largely what we're going to talk about today. But Jim has all sorts of things he's working on, and we will talk about them all. Jim, thank you for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Let's start with salarytutor.com. What is this and who is it for?
So this is a website that helps people, usually ambitious professionals, right? Like a lot of people will say, well, who is this for, Jim? Is it for older people? Is it for men? Is it for women? Is it for college grads? Is it for freelancers? And it's almost more of a psychographic than a demographic, right? It's people that are ambitious. They know they should be doing this. They want to get ahead. They don't want to just accept whatever offer that people are given. And so it's to help those types of people to get the resources they need to kind of get paid what they're worth and stand up for themselves.
So are you finding just that a lot of people are not being paid what they're worth, or they're afraid to ask for a raise? Like, what is that kind of drew you to getting people to learn more about how to do this?
Absolutely. It's something that we're never really taught this, right? And if you think about the ways that you learn anything as you're growing up, right? You either learn things from your parents, and it's like, well, unless your parents are like, Bill Gates or, Warren Buffett or something, they're generally not sitting your kids down and saying, here's how you negotiate your salary. You learn things through college, through school, and most colleges I found aren't, for whatever reason, telling their students how to negotiate their salary. They just want them to get the job. You learn things from work, but your work isn't going to tell you how to get more money. And then the last thing, you learn from your friends. But you know what? Like, salary is a taboo subject. Like, you probably don't know like what all of your friends make. So it's really hard. And I found that not a lot of people were talking about this. There's plenty of books out there, plenty of websites about how to make a resume and how to interview and have a firm handshake, like really stupid, obvious stuff. But no one was talking about how to really negotiate around money. And so that's what drew me to the subject.
Now I'm in a completely different position because I've been doing video production since college, and it's pretty different than the corporate environment, obviously, but there are some similarities when it comes to salaries and deciding what your rates are going to be per day, deciding what your production budgets are going to be. And that's really the big reason why I brought you on, because I think you can talk to our audience about those things. And that's kind of where I want to go from here. The biggest question that I get all the time when people are asking me about how I run the production company and, cinematography rates, things like that, they say, what should I charge? People in this industry, in the video production industry that are freelancers primarily, don't really know what to charge. And how do you help them solve that problem or answer that question?
Sure. And you're 100% right. Like when I look at the three categories of negotiation, the way they fall in is the first is getting a raise at your current job. And it's, again, more corporate. You're there and you know what you're worth. They know what you're worth, and you're proving yourself. The other one is negotiating a new offer, which you go somewhere else. But like you said, that third category is negotiation for freelancers. It's when you're constantly negotiating and you're constantly wondering how much to charge. And each one of those things has a different set of tools. But how much should I charge? You can pull some of the tools from the corporate world of negotiation into that. And so I get it a lot as well. Like, how much should I charge? How much should I charge? What should my rate be? And people are looking to tell you one specific number, right? Like they want to say, how much should I charge, Ben? And they want you to say, like, you should charge $117.32 an hour, right?
Yeah.
And what I found is that in a freelance position, it's less important to try to be so focused on what single number you should charge, but rather have a framework. And so as a set of rules that you can apply every time you look at a job. And I've narrowed it out into like the acronym My Rate, and I can take people through that, I feel like.
Yeah, do it.
Okay, so the first one, and feel free to jump in at any point, and we'll delve into these as much as you'd like. So the first one, the M, is for mindset. So before you get into any kind of money values and things like that, you've got to know your worth. You need to overcome your fears, and as people call it, like going pro, right? You want to look like a professional, act like a professional, and that goes down to everything from just the way you act and the way you present yourself, but also like little things like when you're invoicing them or you're writing up a proposal and having something looking really professional. So even if you're a one-man show, so for example, myself, right? I'm Jim Hopkinson, pretty much a one-man show in this stuff, but my title, I have Hopkinson Creative Media. And so I have a Hopkinson Creative Media website, and I've got logos. And when you give an invoice or you give a proposal, you look like you're a professional. And getting over that mindset of asking for what you're worth and saying, well, who's better than me to do this job? Like sometimes people feel like, who am I to do this? Or how much, I can't really charge that much, but like, who is better than me to do this? And so the first thing is overcoming that mindset. So the second one is the why, which is yes or no. And this is probably the most dangerous one, right? Where you find yourself, you agree to a job, and then you're like, oh my gosh, I never should agree to this. It's a nightmare client.
Oh God, some come to mind. No, my clients are all amazing. Every single one of them I love equally, like children. I love them equally.
So I think that you almost have to head that one off before it starts, and having kind of clear rules around your business about like what you want, where your business is going. Are things aligned with your goals as a business? Is it something worth doing? Is it a good opportunity? And so I think Derek Sivers talked about, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And so you want to be just ideally in a position where you're so excited that you want to work with this person and not trying to justify it. Well, I guess this would be a good thing. You want to be, yes, I definitely want to work with this person.
Well, a lot, and I can speak to that because a lot of times, especially, I don't know how it is in other parts of the country, but I know here in New England, there are definitely ebbs and flows when it comes to the busyness of the production year. I mean, generally, like February, March are my slowest times. And I tend to take things that are just sort of like, I don't really want to do them, but it'll pay the bills for a while. It'll get me through those 2 months. And more than not, those yeses that I give in February and March turn into nightmares because they never end. They go into the summer and they interfere with other things, but it's so hard to say no, especially when you don't have a ton of projects lined up. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, it's definitely easier said than done. And it depends what stage you are in your career. And so if you're kicking away clients, you have so many, it's a lot easier to be like, oh, sure, I'm going to say no to all the bad ones. But I think it comes down to kind of the execution and the experience down there, at the end of this we'll get to. So we'll double back on that, on how to make sure you're working with a great client.
Sure.
So it's my rate. So the R is research. So there's no way around it. You have to do your homework. And, fortunately, there's plenty of information out there in terms of finding out what you should charge. And so the way I look at it, and I'll kind of show you what I recommend in the corporate world, but it ties directly, is I attack it from 5 different ways. So if someone says, hey, what kind of salary should I be making? I'm an accountant, I'm a freelancer, I'm this, what should I be making? So the 5 ways I do kind of for a full-time job is, number 1 are salary sites. So you can go to salary.com, glassdoor.com, PayScale. And a lot of people stop at that, but there's actually 10 or 15 different salary sites. And a lot of them might have things like, video editors and writers and things like that. So go to the salary sites. The second are industry guides. So there's very specific guides that companies put out, that industries put out. Like there's guides for creatives, there's guides for office workers, guides for tech professionals. So if you just enter your professional, so it's like video editor industry salary guide on Google that, there's probably a company out there that will be checking that out. And it's so funny how niche it can get. Like there's sites like jobsintrucks.com, funeraljobs.com I think was one, or cruise line job. Like it's amazing how niche this information can be. So the third one is looking at existing job postings to see if someone else is listing the rate. And so I think they say about 10 or 20% of job postings online have a salary in there. So if you can kind of start looking, and even if you're in a different part, so say you're a videographer in Boston and you're trying to, what do they charge? Look at, find ones that are posted in San Diego or in whatever, in different places, and you can kind of get a feel for that. The last 2 are your internal network and your external network. So internal is, knowing other people in the creative industry that you can rely on and say, what do you think sounds like a good rate for this? And here's this job that I have, and people that and getting their advice. But it's also value to get people you don't know. So say you go to a meetup group or you're at a conference, and you can it's almost sometimes easier. You're, having drinks with someone you just met at this industry conference, and you can just say, what kind of rates, for what you do. And the way I like to position it is never to ask someone like, how much do you make, but put it on yourself and say something like, hey, can I get your advice on something? I'm working on this project. It's, working for a small company. It's a 3-day thing. It's this and this and this. And what I found in my research is that the range was about $75 to $100 an hour. Does that seem like that's about right? And you'll get a response of like, they'll either say, yeah, that sounds about right. Or they'll say something like, oh no, like it's a lot less than that. I'm seeing $60 an hour. Or you might see something like, oh, it's way more than that. We just hired someone last week for $130 an hour. So once you combine all of these things, like looking at the industry research, looking internally, looking at existing jobs out there, you start to get a pretty good feel of what the general range is.
And just to illustrate that kind of as you were speaking there, I just did the exact search you said, video editor salary, and a lot of things came up that were actually legitimate. I mean, payscale.com, Indeed.com had something. I'm right now looking at Glassdoor, and I never really looked at this site. But yeah, I mean, it's all there. It not only shows you the national average, but it shows you the high and it shows you the low and where these positions are across all different companies. And actually happy to say this. Look at this. The average video editor salary, $46,600, but in Boston, can make $50,000, so 7.5% higher than the national median. So yay, Boston!
All right,
that's good to know. But really, basically all I'm saying here is it took 5 seconds to find at least a little bit of information to get you started. So yeah, I think that's a great place to start.
Awesome. So the A in my rate is adjust. So now that you have this range, you would want to adjust it based on the scenario, right? So is this a big time client with a huge budget, or is it a small startup? Is it something you love doing? Is it something that is going to help improve your portfolio? Do they pay in cash? Is the client easy to work with? So all of these things might cause you to adjust your range or your rate that you would charge based on any particular project. The T is for techniques. So these are, these specific negotiation techniques that you can use in the conversation. So let me give you a couple that I use. So one of them is I call my right back at you method. And that's a way to get the other person to give their number first. So they would say something like, oh, this sounds like a really good project. So what do you charge? And you would say something like, I've done a lot of industry research, and what I found is it really varies. It really depends on the size of the company, the size of the project, how long it's going to go, a couple other factors. So I'm just curious, what kind of range did you have in mind, or what kind of budget did you have in mind? Because the way you want to do that is you want to make sure, because if you go too low, then say they wanted to do, $10,000 for some project you're working on. If they had that number in your mind and they ask you and you say something like, well, I was thinking around 7,000, they'd say, sure, that sounds good. And you just cost yourself $3,000. Or if they say, if you say, oh, I was thinking 15,000, and they're like, oh, well, that sounds good. But then they go with someone else because they're less money, but you really wanted to work with them. So that's one technique, is to get them to say the number first.
That's hard to do. It's definitely hard to do.
It is. It takes a lot of practice. And, some people would argue the other way. And there's definitely some stats out there. And it depends kind of how long you've been in the industry. And if you're kind of a well-known premium, a lot of times you'll want to go first and anchor. So it's another technique, is anchoring and giving a large number. So let's say in that same scenario, you say, I charge 15,000. And they're like, whoa, that's a little bit more than I wanted to spend. You might be able to come down from 15,000 versus going up from 7,000. So there's some evidence out there of anchoring like that.
Yeah, I can see it both ways, and I've sort of been in situations in both ways, because there's been a lot of times, and I know this happens in the production industry, and I'm sure people listening are in the same predicament, but sometimes you just get those calls or emails and you know all they're doing is asking for money. They're asking for rates.
Right.
They really aren't ready to do anything. And sometimes I found that they've already selected a production company, but they're just looking around to keep that production company honest. And that happens quite a bit in this industry. And curious, when you can kind of sniff out and they're not really serious, but they still want rates, how do you approach that?
Well, if you're pretty set in your rates and you know what you charge, and then I think it's okay if you get that feeling, you could just tell them what your rates are. And if it's much lower than what they're charging their person, but yet you're comfortable with that rate, then you might get a new client. But you're totally right that you want to be careful of that. And I think what you start to do is just talk more about the job first, right? And that's what I say to people that are negotiating their salary with HR or things like that is, a lot of times people will come to me and like, Jim, what's a trick? What's the secret so I can fool them? And I say, it's never about like tricking and being dishonest. It's always comes from a place of honesty. So if you say something like, and if they say, what's your rate? You can say, well, it really depends. I'd like to talk more about what your goals are for the project and what are some of the things that you'd like to add and what are your outcomes, right? And it's true. Like if they're like, well, just what's your rate? It's true because you can't give a rate until you know what the project is. So you're honestly looking, what if it turns out they're a dream client and they have this awesome new thing that you want to work on, then you might be able to charge a little bit less. But if they're going to be a nightmare and it's got super complicated and something you haven't done before, you'd have to charge a lot more. So you honestly can't give a specific rate until you know all the details of the project.
And from my personal experience, I can tell you that I never, ever, ever will just give random rates on the phone, or if I'm dealing with someone that I know is just trying to get rates and nothing else, unless they're asking for something specific, like I need a single camera operator for a day with this camera package. If it's that cut and dry, then yes, I'll give a rate because it's kind of like a menu item.
Right.
But if they're talking about like, I need like to get a 30-second commercial, it'll probably take a day or two to shoot. How much does that cost? Like, what? and so I will really try my best to not give a rate, especially on the phone, but also try to set up a meeting. And try to set up a phone call or a face-to-face meeting and get more information about this project. You just have to do it. Otherwise, you're going to be shooting yourself in the foot more often than not.
Yeah, and it goes back to that mindset of meeting the person and really getting to know them. And you'd be surprised sometimes when you do get that meeting and you talk it out, maybe they find out, wow, this person offers so much more than the person I'm paying right now. And you make it not about the money up front, but on the value you can deliver.
Now, I know we still have one more letter to go, but this is sort of pertinent to this topic, so I wanted to just interject one more time here. You had mentioned a few minutes ago about the value of starting high and going lower versus starting low and going higher. I think that can work, but for some reason, I always end up in this situation where I'll be meeting with a client and I'll ask them what their budget is, and it's always lower than it should be. It just is. I mean, so I tend to have to always, when I take that route of asking them what their budget is, I always have to go higher because it's always too low. So I am always in a situation where, okay, so how do I get them higher and express and get them to understand the value of what they're paying for? That is the hardest part. You are kind of working on an uphill battle there. That does happen a lot. Do you have any strategies on how to, if you're in the situation where client did give you a budget, it's too low, you now need to go back to them and say, thank you for the information, but here's why it's going to cost 20, 30, 40% more? Because that, I feel like, happens a lot. Do you have any recommendations on how to best deal with that?
One technique you can do, I had an old boss that I worked for that said, we'd price out these projects, and he's like, the answer is never no, it's just here's how long it will take and here's how much it will cost. And so let me give you an example of that. So my friend Helen runs a social media agency, and she, in the beginning, as she was ramping up her business, she was tending to take on as many clients as she could and getting her name out there. And she actually locked into a really high profile international customer, which was amazing. So they signed like a 6-month contract, and she like over delivered, and she did all of these great things. And, they kept adding more on. And so at the end of the 6 months, what she did, she was, providing far more value and spending far too much time on this client. And so instead of kind of raising the rate or approaching it a certain way, what she did is say, here's all the value that I've been providing you. And then she kind of put a dollar figure on all of those things of what it was worth. And then she said, as we renew, I'm happy to keep doing all of these things for you, but here's the new price, what that would be. But if you want me to do this and this and this, and then train your people to do it in-house, we can keep at the same rate. And so it kind of forced them to say, do we want to bring all this in-house, or do we want to keep it the way it is and pay more? So that's kind of a way that you could approach something like that.
That's smart. I think that's smart. And kind of one more question along these lines. Let's say you give a proposal to somebody and they love it. They're like, this is great. The price is perfect. Let's get started right away. And then a week goes by, 2 weeks go by, they start getting cold to it, and you realize, you reach out to them again, what's going on? And they say something like, oh, we're going to have to push this into third quarter of next year because XY budget, yada, yada. How long do you honor your price before you decide that it needs to go up? Because your vendors are going to charge more a year later. So how do you deal with that?
That's a great question. I feel like that's something you has this happened in your experience before?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
absolutely.
I feel like it's like you don't think about that until it happens to you. And then when it does, it sounds like you need to have a theory on that, like a rule on that. And so you probably have good advice for people on that one to say.
Not yet, because I'm still dealing with it.
Well, maybe it's something you just add into a contract up front. And, this just happened to me. We hired a video editor. And unfortunately, we did that to him a little bit. We were, hey, we're going to hire you. We're probably going to hire you on a retainer at the end of the year. This goes great. And business happens and things got delayed. Yep. And it forced him to have to readjust his schedule. And I felt really bad. And so we agreed, next time, let's lock it in. And he put in a thing that said, we're planning to start on this day. And then he said, if it goes more than 3 days after that start date, he put like a fee that we would get charged to, if we didn't start on time when we said we would. And I think it's actually helpful on both sides, because it was helpful for me. I realized we had done this to him. I felt, terrible about it. And it really forced me to get my team going and say, hey, we got to start. If we don't start within the first 3 days, we're going to get pinged for this extra money. So it really motivated me to work with the person.
I like that. So put it in the contract. So there we are. We did MYRAT. So what is the E?
So the E is a double. So it's execution and experience, right? And so the experience is this just gets easier the longer you're in business, right? If this is your first photo shoot or your first time building a website, you're not going to know what to charge. You're probably going to work more hours than you want. You're probably taking on poor clients. But if you've been doing this 10 or 15 years and someone comes up, how much to build a website? How much to do a video shoot? You're going to be able to ask them, boom, how long's the shoot? How many people on there? Is it you're using a teleprompter? Da da da. And you're going to have a pretty good idea just based on your experience. And then kind of executing on it, like putting together the structure. So should you do something that's hourly? Should you do something that's project-based? I found an Elance survey a while back that said 63% of people preferred a project basis, 17% hourly, and 20% had no preference. So I'm not sure if that's the same type of thing you're seeing, but maybe some of the guidelines sometimes I like to start hourly. So hourly is great if it's maybe a long project or there's a lot of uncertainty around it, or there's going to be a lot of changes or unclear objectives. And then a project would be more if it's very well defined. Maybe it's clients you've worked with before. Clients like predictability of knowing what your project rate will be. And it's better if you're selling your expertise, not your time.
Yeah.
So, and then there's a hybrid model. I had a friend, I asked her what she preferred, and she said, I like to start off on an hourly basis, especially with new clients, and kind of test them, almost what you were just saying. So what she would do, they'd sign the contract, everyone would be excited. And, a couple of days in, she would give them a test like, okay, hey, I need give me the logos that you're using, by the end of the week. And she's like, Jim, it was such a great test. Like, you'd be amazed how it's a simple thing. Like, hey, we need your logos. And in some companies, it's like, oh, talk to the designer, email, it's in a zip file, they send it over, here's your logos, done. But some people take, oh yeah, we'll get those to you. And it takes 3 weeks to get you their logo. And so that's a good indicator that, hey, maybe they don't have their act together. And you'll feel better, like, doesn't matter to me, I'm getting paid hourly. So they can take as long as they want, I'm gonna keep charging hourly. But once they've kind of proven themselves, then she kind of switches from hourly to the project basis.
For me, I think the project one is better only because it's I don't know, I find it really hard for some clients, especially ones that aren't familiar with video production, to justify hourly rates. I think, if you don't know what you're talking about, you can look at someone who's charged, 100 hours, let's say, and say, that took you 100 hours. You know what I mean? It's like, if you don't know, then it could be a really remarkable, well, not remarkable. If you don't know, it could be a really big number. And people can get stressed out by that, where I feel like project is almost like, okay, this is what it's going to be. I don't care how long it takes you. Just do it, and I'm paying for the project, and that's it. I don't know. It's hard. It's a toss-up. I'm sure there's people listening saying, no, hourly is the way to go. But for me, it's more project.
Yeah, I think it depends on those things. And like you said, if you're selling your expertise, then you're saying people are buying an outcome. They don't want to know about, what program you use to edit it. They want a final video. So it's selling that expertise at the end.
You know what I tend to do is rounds of revisions. That's sort of like the number, so that people can have, I'll say it costs this much, you have 2 rounds of revisions. And I'll very specifically lay out what is a round of revision, what am I expecting from them, when am I expecting it from them. And that seems to keep people on track, but you never know. Every client's a little bit different.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
You are listening to the PremiumBeat.com Song of the Week. It's called The Seventh Parallel by Stuart Rao. Premium Beat is where to go for all of your royalty-free music and sound effects. They have a great website where you can access their collection of thousands of royalty-free tracks for as low as $49 each. And it's not just the actual full track. They have cut downs, 15s, 30s, 60-second tracks. They also have loop sets, so you really have a ton of customizing opportunity here to make the song you choose fit your project perfectly. A link to this track will be in the show notes at gocreativeshow.com, but don't even worry about going there. Just go straight to premiumbeat.com because you'll find the music you're looking for. You're going to love it, and you'll be so happy because it'll be super cheap and really effective, and your clients will love it as well. What else can I say? Premiumbeat.com. Head over there now. You will be glad you did. All right, and lastly, let's talk about Kessler Crane. The Kessler Shutter Dolly is the latest innovation in camera dollies and finally provides filmmakers with the performance and versatility dollies in its class have always lacked. Until now, the Shutter Dolly utilizes standard speed rails and can be operated manually or in conjunction with Kessler's motion control solutions, CineDrive, and Second Shooter Plus. Find more information at KesslerCrane.com, KesslerCrane.com. We always talk about the Shutter Dolly because it's awesome and works really well, and everybody loves it. But there's so much other stuff on there, too. So head over there, KesslerCrane.com. You probably have a bunch of their stuff already, and you certainly, if you're doing video production, you're working on sets where there's Kessler gear all over the place, especially if you're on my sets, there's Kessler gear all over the place, because it's really great stuff. And I love these guys, and that's why I love talking about them and thank them very much for their support. KesslerCrane.com. All right, we're moving on to the rest of our interview with Jim Hopkinson. I want to talk about the pros and cons of undercutting your competition, because this happens a lot in the production industry, especially with people starting out. They'll make a big splash. They'll get their name out there in the area. By charging so little, they get so much work. But in effect, that can sort of dumb down the costs overall. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's probably always been done in any business, right? Yeah. It's not as desirable, obviously, because it's kind of a bait and switch with your clients. If they come out, this client is great, and then there's so much cheaper, and then they have to make the money somewhere, right? There's no free lunch. So yeah. I think as a freelancer, and we talked about, you say your budget's 15 and they say 10 and you're bringing down, about sticking to your rates as well. And it kind of goes into talking about, here's my rate, and not discounting all the time, because they'll always think you have a discount, but instead keeping those different pieces that you can offer. Like, I can't do it for this much. I'm not going to discount it, but I will take this away. Or you can do the opposite and say, hey, here's the price, and you get these extra things that are on top of it. So I don't know. I think it's about differentiation and not selling yourself on price. So if you're in the industry and it's your competitors that are undercutting, I think it's about selling yourself on the value that you provide versus what the dollar figure is. And a great way to do that is what I call my not only this but that method. And so I've used this. So one example I gave was someone was going for a job. And it's a great way to justify your price. So you take two things that you do that the competition does as well. So let's, I guess, take video editing and say, you're going to do amazing video editing. You're going to have whatever, high production values. And then, so two things that they would do and you do. And then the last thing is something you do better than anyone else. Something unique to you and something that the competition doesn't do. So let's say for this particular project, you were doing a video for a mobile startup or something like that. Say it's a promotional video for a new app or something like that. So if they come back to you and they say something like, well, I know you're charging $15,000, but your competition over here is saying $10,000 and they're going to do a lot of the same things. Why should I pay $15,000? You would say something like, the reason why we can provide a better experience is not only will you get the expert video editing that we provide and the high-end production values, but you'll also get my experience working specifically with app production for mobile startups. And that's, therefore, the range that we're providing provides excellent value for that. And I usually have to work over that language a few times to get it actually, perfect. But it sets up this framework in their mind to say, okay, both of them do video editing, both of them do high-end production, but this guy has specific experience in that thing that I need, and people are willing to pay more for that.
SalaryTutor.com is your site. How long have you been running this site?
I've been running it since about 2011.
So on SalaryTutor.com, you have a section here that is called online courses. And just by looking at it, because you got a free video here for people to check out the introductory course, but just by seeing the video, you can tell that this is the area that you are really, really passionate about. And you're really engaging and interesting to listen to as well. So I want you to just take a couple of minutes and talk to us about your online courses, what they're all about, and how people can access them.
Sure. It's really been something I've loved. So I was fortunate enough in 2011 to get a book deal for, Salary Tutor, the book. And that was great, except down the line, you don't own that experience, right? So you have a publisher and they're collecting the names. And so I wanted a way to kind of scale and to reach other people and have another way of myself to be, bringing in some income and doing something I love. And so I decided to build these online courses, and it is so much fun. I scripted it out and I act in them, and I kind of combine entertainment and information. So if you give great information, but it's not fun to watch, then it's okay. And if you're really funny, but you don't have any good takeaways, that doesn't work. So I hired improv trained actors, and I wrote out these almost like Saturday Night Live-esque skits. And there's one scenario I did where, Allison, the star of the negotiation, is talking with the evil HR lady. And I say, I'm not going to be able to be there with you in your interview. And you pan back and I'm standing behind the evil HR lady holding up cue cards telling Allison what to say.
Yes.
So I had a lot of fun with it. That the first course I have on there is totally free. It's called the Negotiation Mindset. More than 20,000 people have taken it. And it's kind of that first step of my rate, of the M, and just psyching yourself up, knowing that you can negotiate, that this is something that companies expect you to do, that other vendors expect you to do. So once you get over that mindset, then you can take that a bit deeper.
The other thing too that's really great about it is, first of all, everybody in the audience we certainly value good production quality, and this has it. I mean, this is not like your crappy tutorial video from a million years ago that was like shot on VHS and then just thrown online. This is brand new. It looks really good. The interface is excellent. It's almost kind of like the way lynda.com does it. Where it's just really straightforward. You can get to specific sections of it if you want to. I just love it. I think it's great. And your introductory course is free, so why not? You got to head over to salarytutors.com and click on online courses, and you'll get there from there. But this is really, really cool stuff, and I love the information that you have on here.
Thank you.
Lastly, you co-wrote a book called How to Quit Your Job the Right Way, How to Quit Your Job the Right Way, a 5-step plan to ditching your day job. Now, I'm sure this isn't the book that you came on the show to really push, but I wanted to talk about it anyway, just for a minute. Not the book necessarily, but the idea of quitting your job. We talked about ways to bump up your salary, to approach your clients, but what happens if you're just kind of in a job that you don't want to do anymore? What is the value of quitting? I mean, it seems like such a strange, counterintuitive thing to promote, but I'm curious from your opinion, why did you co-write the book, and what are your thoughts on it?
I think it's part of the new economy that we're in, that, in the old days, you worked, you had a very set schedule, right? You graduated college, you got a good job, you worked for IBM and you were there until you retired, and it was a job, right? And I think with technology and, with the way education is going and $1 trillion of student debt and people are graduating without the skills and you're working, like, how are these people? This is a great story that's in there from, his last name is Victori, and he was teaching. He's a creative guy. He was teaching a class, and he was talking about creative pursuits and writing and filming and all these things. And a kid raises his hand in the back, and he's like, "Mr. Victori, this is all great and all, but I've got rent to pay." And he's like, "Son, what's your name?" And he's like, I forget, Charles or something. He's like, "Charles." He's like, "This is your tombstone. It says, here lies Charles. He would have done great things, but he had to pay the rent." And he was just like, I was so beat down that this kid was so, he had given up, but he didn't even graduate college yet, right? So I'm pretty fired up about having people do their dream job. And I mean, you're doing this 40, 50 hours a week and you're commuting, and it's like, life is too short to stay in a job you hate. So there's so many ways you can, do something you love.
It's such an interesting topic. And, we're lucky in the production industry. We're generally, I think most of the people that choose to do production, especially on a freelance basis, love it. You know what I mean? Because it's not easy. And if you didn't love it, you just wouldn't do it, especially freelance where there's no security at all. But it is an interesting idea. I think a lot of people that have quit their job transitioned it to something more artistic, perhaps like video production, web design, graphic design, whatever. And it's just a cool book to point out. And I'll put a link to that and all of your other stuff in the show notes as well. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for talking to us. This is such great information. And you're a blast to talk with. And I, again, strongly encourage people, go to salarytutor.com and check them out and buy some of those tutorials because they're excellent things.
Thanks so much, Ben. I had a great time.
I want to thank Jim Hopkinson for coming on the show and teaching us all about how to get our rates on track, how to talk to our clients about budgets. These are huge topics, and you have to go into these negotiations with confidence. And I hope that that is what this episode has given you, is the confidence to talk about these things with your clients. If you want more information, and I know you do, Go to salarytutor.com and learn more about Jim and what he has to offer and all of his tutorials. There's great stuff there. salarytutor.com. I want to thank Matt Russell from Gain Structure Sound for mixing, mastering, and making the show sound so great. Gainstructure.com and on Twitter @GainStructure. And while you're on Twitter, you can tweet us @GoCreativeShow. Tell us what you think of the show. Give us some guest suggestions, and we'll have those people on. But of course, I want to thank our sponsors, Hedge for Mac, Rule Boston Camera, Kessler Crane, NewsShooter.com, and Premium Beat. Without these people, the show wouldn't exist. So please support those that support us, and we'll continue giving you great content week after week. See you guys soon. Bye-bye.